Hey everyone! If this happened to you, would you confront the person directly or cut them out and move on? Comment confront or move on. And tell us why. Now, let's hear what happened. I sat in the courtroom, the air thick with tension. The old wood and polished brass felt suffocating. My father's smirk filled the room, the same one he wore when he thought he had won. The judge barely looked at me, his gaze shifting like a bad poker player trying not to blink. I knew what this was. The deck was stacked. The man in the black robe was his lifelong friend. He'd make sure this went his way. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, eyes flicking between my father and me. I could feel their judgment, his people. I was the distraction, the problem, the one who didn't fit into their shiny little picture. Then my father's voice cut through the hum, smooth as oil. This is just a formality. We're here to clear up a few misunderstandings. I didn't care what he had to say. Not anymore. My hand shook slightly, but I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. I stood. The silence pressed in. My lawyer shot me a look, urging me to stay silent. I wasn't here to play nice. I wasn't here to pretend anymore. Project Lantern, I said, my voice cutting through the thick air like a knife. Immediately, the courtroom's energy shifted. A whisper, a murmur, a change in the temperature, like the air had just been sucked out of the room. The judge's face went pale for a second. His gavel shook in his hand as he slammed it down, more violently than necessary. My father faltered, just for a moment, his jaw tightening. I saw it, the crack in his armor. He didn't expect me to say it. The judge was on his feet now, stammering. This is... I didn't wait. I sat back down, letting the silence hang. There was no going back now. The judge's gavel had barely settled when I felt the weight of it all. Every stare in the room, every whisper, the calculated calm of my father. His posture hadn't shifted. His smug smile was still there, like he was waiting for me to make the next move. But it wasn't just him I had to worry about. I glanced at my lawyer, his face pale but his eyes sharp. He'd been whispering under his breath, telling me to hold back, to let them dig themselves in deeper. He was still in damage control mode. I was just getting started. This wasn't about a petty inheritance dispute. This wasn't about me wanting a cabin in the woods or a few dusty old business records. My mother left it all to me, the cabin, the business, the savings, and I was damn well going to protect what was rightfully mine. But my father, he'd already made up his mind. The moment my mother died, he started remaking everything she built, folding it into a shiny new version of the life he wanted, and that new life had a younger wife, with political connections and a network of powerful friends. He couldn't afford a daughter like me, one who didn't fit into his perfect family portrait. That's what this was really about, control. The petition he'd filed claimed I was unfit to inherit anything. The whole thing was a joke. It was his way of rewriting the narrative and rerouting everything to his new wife's family. My past, my involvement in the fire investigation, was the perfect excuse. The only reason I was unfit was because I had the audacity to speak out when everyone else just wanted to bury the truth. The will was clear. My mother had made sure of it. But we both knew it didn't matter. The judge's bias was blatant. He wasn't interested in facts. He was interested in protecting the reputation of his old friend, my father. And if it meant my life and my mother's legacy getting bulldozed in the process, then so be it. I could feel the tension building. The room was getting colder, but my anger was burning hotter. My father had turned his back on me long before this court case. I was a failure in his eyes ever since the fire. He didn't want a daughter who couldn't be controlled. After everything I went through, everything I lost, he had the audacity to call me unfit. He didn't want the truth about what happened to come out, because that meant the entire foundation of his empire would crack. My lawyer leaned in again, his voice barely a whisper. You can't win this with your history, not yet. Let them push. Just wait. I wanted to argue, to push back harder, but he was right. I had to play it smart. I had to let them think they were in control, let them bury themselves under their lies. But I wasn't just waiting, I was planning. The fire, the investigation, the cover-up, it all had to come out. I couldn't let my mother's trust be swallowed up by these people, by the machine they'd built for themselves. My father's empire was built on manipulation, on deals with the wrong people, on silencing anyone who stood in his way. I wouldn't let him get away with it, not again. I didn't need their approval, their inheritance, or their false sense of superiority. My mother trusted me with the truth, and I would honor that trust. I would find a way to expose what really happened in that warehouse. And when I did, they'd have to answer for it. All of them. This wasn't just about an inheritance anymore. This was about justice. And I wasn't going to stop until I got it. The hum of the courtroom faded into the back of my mind as I leaned back in my chair. My father's cold gaze was fixed on me, but it didn't matter. The truth had already started to unravel, and I was the one holding the thread. But that thread, it led back to a different time, to a mission that still haunted me, the fire, the one that ruined everything. I had warned them. I had raised flags. No one listened. They just told me to proceed. It was supposed to be a routine operation, a controlled burn, to flush out a suspected chemical storage warehouse. There had been rumors, too many to ignore, that someone was using the place to stash illegal chemicals. We were the team that specialized in high-risk operations, the ones called in when things were too volatile for the local fire department to handle. I remember standing at the perimeter of the warehouse, the air thick with the smell of gasoline and old metal. My team was lined up, everyone checking their gear, moving in sync. I could feel the weight of the moment, the tension that came with knowing you were about to light the fuse on something that could go horribly wrong. I'd been the one to push for extra prep time. The power grid logs didn't match up, and there were anomalies in the permits. Someone had altered the inspection records. Too many discrepancies for me to ignore. But when I brought it up, my superiors told me to stop second-guessing the intel and get on with it. They had the green light. I was just the lead. "You're not paid to think, Mendoza. You're paid to execute," one of them had said, dismissing my concerns like I was nothing but a cog in the machine. We set the charges, ignited the perimeter. The flames caught quickly, licking up the sides of the building. But then, something changed. A flash. A roar. I saw the explosion coming, but I couldn't stop it. It wasn't a controlled burn anymore. It was a trap. The explosion rocked the ground beneath us, sending debris flying through the air. The heat hit like a wall, suffocating, disorienting. My ears were ringing, the world a blur of smoke and fire. "Move!" I screamed, pushing through the heat. But it was too late. The warehouse collapsed in on itself, trapping 5 of my team members inside. I barely made it out of the blast radius. My body was covered in burns, but I was alive. I don't even remember how I got to the others, but I do remember dragging Steve through broken glass, his hand limp in mine. The jagged edges cut deep into my palm, and I could feel the blood pouring from the wound. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. When the fire finally died down, there was nothing left but ash. 5 of my team were gone. I was left holding a useless piece of my life. They called it a miscalculation, a failure to follow procedure. The official report blamed me, my hesitation, my mismanagement. They buried the truth in the paperwork, spun the narrative to protect their own asses. The real cause of the explosion? Someone had rigged it. Someone with connections. I wasn't allowed to speak out. My career was over. And the people who'd failed us, who'd put us in that position in the first place, they were untouchable. I woke up every day with the weight of their bodies in my mind. Every day that scar on my hand reminded me of what I couldn't save, what I couldn't change. I should have known better than to trust them. But at the time, I had been too damn naive, too loyal, too eager to prove myself. But now, sitting here, knowing that the truth was finally slipping out, that it was all starting to come back, I realized something. My father was part of it. He'd played his part. He'd accepted the hush money after the fire, not to protect me, but to protect his empire. He couldn't afford to let people know what happened, or the people who pulled the strings behind it. The thought made me sick. I hadn't just lost my team, I had lost everything. And for what? To cover up the truth? To keep the people at the top safe? To make sure my father could keep collecting checks while we all burned? I wasn't going to let it go anymore. Not now. Not when it was all falling apart. Sitting in that courtroom, I couldn't help but think of my father, the man who once claimed I was the best thing he'd ever produced. When I was useful to him, of course, he never told me he loved me, at least not in a way that made sense to me. His approval was always conditional, always linked to my performance. Nothing was ever enough to make him proud unless it was a win that could boost his status. I could feel it even as a kid. Everything I did was measured against some invisible standard that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with what he wanted me to be. When I was younger, I tried so hard to fit into the mold he'd created for me. He expected excellence, no mistakes, no compromise. And for a long time, I gave it to him. I made him proud. At least I thought I did. But once I wasn't useful anymore, Once I failed in a way he couldn't control, I was nothing to him. After the fire, that was when I finally understood. He distanced himself completely, like I was a stain on his name. He didn't even hear me out. I wanted to explain, to tell him it wasn't my fault, to make him see what had really happened. But he didn't care about the truth. He cared about saving face. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about his image, his empire, his reputation. "Don't embarrass the family," he'd say when I tried to bring it up. It wasn't about the lives we lost. It was about what it looked like on paper. He could never understand that there was more to me than just being a cog in his perfect family machine. The fire was a turning point, and I wasn't the one who got to define what happened. He did. The official report was a convenient lie that fed his narrative. It framed me as someone who couldn't handle the pressure, as if the lives lost were my failure. In reality, the whole thing had been rigged from the start, but he didn't want anyone asking questions. Not even me. Now, sitting here in this courtroom, I knew what was happening. Filing to block my inheritance wasn't personal. It was strategic. My father didn't care about the business or the cabin or any of it. He cared about rewriting the story, making sure the legacy he wanted to build wasn't tainted by me or by the truth. My value to him was always about how much I could contribute to his image. And once I wasn't useful, once I became a liability, he had no need for me. The man I thought was my father had already replaced me with a better version of the family he wanted to project. His new wife, his political connections, they were his new ticket to the future, and I was just an obstacle. I could feel the walls closing in. The weight of it, the realization that I was nothing to him, that I had never really been anything to him beyond a tool. I'd spent so much of my life trying to make him proud, trying to earn his love. But in his eyes, my worth ended the second my usefulness did. Now, as I looked at him in that courtroom, I didn't feel anger or sadness or even hurt. I just felt cold. The man who had fathered me was a stranger, and in his world, the truth didn't matter. Only what you could take with you and what you could destroy to get there. I wasn't going to let him rewrite my story. Not now, not ever. The judge slammed his gavel down again, the noise sharp enough to make my teeth rattle. He motioned for the proceedings to continue, and just like that, the game was back on. I wasn't surprised when he overruled my lawyer's first motion, then the second. His eyes never left my father's legal team, the little group of sharks who were circling, ready to feast. Every time they threw something at us, the judge didn't hesitate. No questions, no consideration. Just a firm, overruled. His bias was naked, and I couldn't look away. "Objection, Your Honor," my lawyer called out, but it was useless. He knew it, I knew it, and the judge certainly knew it. We were in a rigged system. All my father's legal team had to do was show up and talk loudly enough to make everyone forget about the truth. Hearsay, unsigned documents, they didn't care. They pushed every weak argument and garbage piece of evidence, knowing the judge would back them up no matter what. I was trying to stay calm, trying to block out the sound of the gavel banging down like a hammer on a nail. The air was thick, heavy, like the whole room had been swamped in the same oppressive energy that filled me whenever I thought about what happened after the fire, when everything I had worked for, everything my mother had trusted me with, had been taken from me by people like this. But then, something shifted. I didn't look away from the judge or my father, but I noticed them. Two people in the back of the room. One was an older man, his eyes trained on me. There was something unsettling about his gaze. He wasn't just watching the proceedings, he was watching me, specifically my scar, the one from the fire. My hand instinctively twitched, like I could feel his stare burning through the skin. It was like he knew exactly what it meant, like he could trace the story of that day from the mark on my palm. I forced myself to look back at the table, not wanting to give him anything. Not yet. The other person was a young woman. She sat hunched over, furiously scribbling notes. Her eyes darted between me, my father's team, and the judge, never pausing. I could feel her focus in a way that was almost too intense, like she wasn't just a bystander, but someone who was digging into the details, looking for something hidden. I couldn't figure out if she was with them or if she was working against them. Either way, I could sense she wasn't just watching. She was looking for leverage. I glanced at my lawyer. His face was tight, focused, but there was something in his eyes. He'd noticed them too. He leaned in close, his voice barely audible. "Not yet. Wait. Wait." I could feel the courtroom closing in, the weight of the judge's mocking tone and the constant barrage of my father's legal team. Every word out of their mouths twisted the truth, painted me as a liability. an unfit heir to a legacy I had every right to. The judge was making it worse. Every time he ridiculed my credibility, every time he sided with them without a second thought, I felt like I was losing ground. My lawyer's hand was light on the table, his fingers tapping in a slow rhythm that I couldn't ignore. I wanted to speak, to call them out, to say something, but I knew it wasn't the right time. I had to let the corruption unfold, let it come into full view. If I moved too fast, if I pushed too hard now, they'd shut me down. I had to wait for them to dig their own grave, to bury themselves under the weight of their lies. The judge, as if on cue, turned his attention to me, his voice dripping with condescension. Ms. Mendoza, unless you have anything of value to add to these proceedings, I suggest you remain silent. The crowd shifted in their seats, whispers rippling through the gallery. My father's lawyer, a smug man with slicked back hair, shot me a grin. He was enjoying this, every second of it. They were all enjoying it. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, feeling the heat of their eyes, the weight of their expectations, and I let the silence stretch, let it hang between us, thick with tension, let it fester in the room. Because I knew what they didn't. Sooner or later, the truth always found its way out. It didn't matter how many lies they threw at me. I wasn't going to be the one buried under their pile of corruption, not this time. The judge was still droning on, his voice like a dull hum in the background. I could feel the tension in the room, the weight of it pressing down harder with every passing second. My father's legal team was relentless, pushing through more bullshit with every objection they raised. I could barely stand it. The words they were using, the way they twisted everything, none of it was true. But the judge didn't care. He didn't care about truth. He cared about who could pay him the most, who could make him look good. My lawyer's hand was still on the table, a quiet signal to hold steady. But every second felt like it was chipping away at me. I could feel the stares of the gallery, the older man still watching me, the young woman still scribbling. It was suffocating. They were waiting for something, but I couldn't tell what. I stood slowly, the sound of my chair scraping against the floor, making the room fall silent for just a moment. All eyes turned to me. My father's head jerked up. His smirk faltered. But he recovered quickly. His team leaned in, whispering to each other like they were plotting their next move. I didn't care. I wasn't here for their games anymore. I walked to the microphone, the air growing thicker with each step. There was something in the pit of my stomach, something electric that told me this was it. This was the moment everything would change. I took a breath, my fingers brushing against the microphone. Then, without hesitation, I said the words that had been building in my chest for what felt like a lifetime. Project Lantern. Instant panic. The room shifted. I saw the older man's eyes flick to my scar, his expression changing, calculating. And then, just like that, his head dipped slightly, a subtle nod, but it felt like an earthquake in the quiet of the room. The young woman froze mid-note, her pen suspended above the page, like she'd been caught in the middle of something she didn't want anyone to know she was paying attention to. Her eyes darted to the man, then back to me. Her grip on the notebook tightened, and I knew she wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was involved in whatever was happening next. The judge's face shifted. Just a flash, but it was enough to see the panic that he had buried under his usual facade of control. He stood up abruptly, banging his gavel down harder than usual. "Recess," he barked, cutting off the proceedings before anyone could respond. His voice wavered, the cracks in his authority starting to show. The courtroom didn't go quiet. It went tense, like the pressure in the air had reached its breaking point. I could see my father's face now. His usual arrogance wiped clean off. He looked like someone had punched him in the gut. His team immediately began to murmur among themselves, casting furtive glances at each other like they didn't know what the hell just happened. I didn't care about their panic. I wasn't here to comfort them. Guards started moving through the room, standing at attention, their presence an unspoken warning. I could feel the shift in the room, the sudden charge in the air that signaled something much bigger was coming. People were scrambling, exchanging urgent whispers under their breath, sending messages through hidden devices. The older man had started speaking to someone on his phone, his voice low but insistent. The young woman was still scribbling, but now her focus had completely changed. I saw her eyes dart between the older man and the judge, like she was trying to piece something together. The guards were setting up barriers now, making sure no one could leave, securing the room. The judge, still standing, was speaking quietly into his earpiece, his hand on his temple, like he was trying to control the situation. But it was clear he was losing it. Whatever had just been said, whatever had just been unleashed, had thrown them all off balance. My heart was beating harder, but I didn't show it. I didn't need to. I could feel it now. This wasn't just a court case anymore. This was the beginning of something far bigger. This wasn't about the cabin, the estate, or the will. It was about the truth, about the things that had been buried under layers of corruption and lies. And I was done being the one they buried. I had just lit the fuse, and I wasn't about to let them put it out. The recess felt like it stretched on forever. I stood in the same spot, my pulse still racing, my mind working overtime to process everything that had just happened. The room was a whirlwind of activity, but I couldn't pull my gaze away from the people who had just shifted the balance of power. The older man, the young woman. I didn't know who they were, but I knew they were part of something bigger. The murmur of voices around me grew louder, but I couldn't focus on the noise. I was back in that warehouse again, the heat, the explosion, the screams. There were too many things I had missed, too many red flags I had ignored, things that were now clicking together like pieces of a puzzle I'd never been given the chance to solve. I thought I had failed my team, that I was the one who'd let them down. But now, I realized the truth. The fire had never been an accident. The permits were doctored, the inspection logs scrubbed, the blueprints were faked. I had raised my concerns about all of it before the mission, but my superiors had shoved me aside, told me to shut up and follow orders. I thought it was just sloppy work, a mistake. But now I knew better. Someone with high-level connections had set the trap, manipulating everything so the mission would fail, and my team would pay the price. Someone knew exactly how to make sure the right people didn't get caught. I never realized how deep it went until now. The web of lies wasn't just about protecting one fire. It was about covering up a much bigger operation. My father's empire wasn't just built on land deals and developments. It was built on manipulation, on lies, on putting people in the path of destruction to protect his own assets. I felt a cold anger crawl through me, tightening my chest. My father had taken hush money after the fire, not to protect me, but to protect himself, to keep his name off the paperwork, to keep the truth buried. And when I didn't fit into the neat little package he wanted to sell, he turned on me. He was willing to throw me away to preserve his reputation. A soft tap on my shoulder snapped me out of my thoughts. I turned to find the young woman from the gallery standing behind me. Her expression was calm, almost too calm, like she was trying to gauge how much I already knew. She looked around quickly, making sure no one else was paying attention. "You're Yara Mendoza, right?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. I nodded slowly, not sure what to say. She glanced at the guards, who were still busy securing the room, and then leaned in a little closer. "Project Lantern," she whispered, her eyes flicking to the side. "It's linked to more than just your team. Multiple suppressed disasters. The real culprit has been manipulating private land deals, arson reports, and disaster declarations for profit." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just about me, or the fire, or my father's shady empire. This was bigger. Someone had been using disasters, like the one that killed my team, to cover up their tracks, to make money off the ashes. I felt the weight of it settle over me, but I didn't have time to process it. I had to keep moving, had to stay ahead of whatever they were planning. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice steady even though my mind was racing. "Not someone you need to know yet," she replied quickly, glancing over her shoulder again. "But I'm with the federal team. We're starting an internal review of the documents you've been dealing with, the ones your father's team tried to hide." She paused, her expression hardening. "The truth's about to come out, but it won't be easy." I didn't need her to tell me that. I'd seen enough to know that what was coming wasn't going to be pretty. But it was real. It was happening. Before I could respond, the older man appeared at the other side of the room. He was moving with purpose, but there was something deliberate about the way he walked, like he knew the doors were closing behind him. He caught my eye for a split second, his gaze unreadable, before he stepped toward one of the guards, muttering something under his breath. The guard nodded and left the room, moving swiftly. The air shifted again. The tension in the room was palpable. The federal team was making its move. I could feel it now. This wasn't just a legal battle over a will anymore. This was a war. One that I was finally ready to fight. The young woman turned to leave, but stopped for a moment. "You'll need to be careful. There's more coming than you know. Don't trust anyone in here." With that, she was gone, disappearing into the crowd of people who were starting to buzz with confusion and uncertainty. I didn't need any more warnings. I could feel it in my bones. The game had changed, and now it was my turn to play. The truth was out there, and I wasn't going to stop until it all came crashing down. I sat across from my father in the witness waiting room, the sterile walls pressing in on us, the air thick with unspoken words. His face was pale, a far cry from the confident smirk he had worn in the courtroom. Now he looked like a man who'd just realized the ground was slipping from under him. The silence between us stretched long, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything. What was there to say? He had already made his choices, and I'd made mine. The truth hung between us like a weight neither of us could shake off. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower than usual. I took the payout after the fire, took the money, kept the estate under my name. He didn't look at me when he said it, like he was trying to pretend the words didn't taste bitter in his mouth. In case you lost your pension, in case you couldn't handle the fallout. I didn't blink. His voice was soft now, but it didn't change anything. You didn't protect me, I said, my voice cold. You protected yourself, your name, your empire. He flinched, a brief flicker of regret crossing his face. But it was gone too quickly. He shifted uncomfortably, trying to regain his usual control. I did what I thought was best. You were ruined after the fire. The whole thing, the investigation, the report, it was a mess. You couldn't afford the reputation, and I couldn't risk losing everything. Everything? I repeated, my voice rising without meaning to. You mean your money, your deals? Because you didn't care about me or the people we lost. You only cared about covering your own ass. He looked away, his hands folded on the table. I didn't have a choice, he muttered, like that was supposed to make it okay. I leaned forward, every muscle in my body tense. It's not vengeance, you know. What I'm doing, it's justice. The words hung in the air. He didn't say anything to that. Maybe because he knew it was true, maybe because he didn't have the words to argue anymore. His eyes flickered toward the door, and I knew he was trying to figure out his next move, trying to see if he could salvage anything from this. Before he could speak, the door swung open, and a man stepped in. Tall, uniformed, with a presence that could silence a room without a word. I recognized him immediately, admiral level, the kind of official who didn't come to these things unless the stakes were far higher than anyone wanted to admit. He gave us both a look, then focused on me. Mendoza, he said, his voice steady, calm like he already knew exactly who I was. I need a word. I glanced at my father, who looked as if he were about to say something but stopped. The man waited for no one. He didn't even look at my father as he gestured for me to follow him out of the room. We stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind us. The admiral didn't waste time. The manipulator you're chasing, the one behind your team's deaths, is still active. He's been in contact with the judge. Recently. I felt the room spin, my heart skipping a beat. What do you mean, in contact? Direct contact, the admiral clarified, lowering his voice. We've been tracking the communications. He's trying to pull strings from behind the scenes, influence this case. But we've got him cornered. He's not getting away with this. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady myself. So, what does that mean for this case? It means we're taking it federal, he said, his eyes locking on mine, deadly serious. We're taking control of the evidence, all of it. The files, the documents your father's team tried to bury, everything. The judge has been compromised, the wheels are already in motion. I felt the weight of his words settle in. This was bigger than my father, bigger than the estate or the cabin or any of the petty power struggles. This was about something real, something that could finally bring down the people who had pulled the strings for so long. I nodded, a knot of resolve tightening in my chest. Let's do this. The admiral gave me a tight smile. You're not alone in this anymore. We'll handle the legal side. You focus on getting the truth out. He turned to leave but stopped at the door. You might want to brace yourself. This won't be easy, but we're finally going after the people who set this whole thing in motion. As he walked away, I looked back at the closed door behind me, where my father still sat. The man who had sold me out. The man who had let my team burn. This wasn't just about the inheritance. This was bigger. This was the fight for everything we had lost. And I wasn't walking away until I saw it through. The forest was quiet, the only sounds the rustle of leaves in the wind and the occasional bird call overhead. I hadn't been here in years. The memorial was tucked away in a secluded part of the woods, hidden from view, as if even nature itself wanted to protect the memory of what had happened. The stones marking the graves were simple, anonymous, nothing more than placeholders for the 6 men and women I had led into that nightmare. I knelt at the edge of the small clearing, pulling 6 fire-charged stones from the bag I carried. Each one was a reminder of what I couldn't save. I placed them gently, one by one, at the foot of their graves. There were no names here, no grand markers of who they had been, just 6 stones, and me. I sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of the silence, the way the world felt too small and too large at the same time. I had promised them justice, and every step I had taken since that day had been a step toward making that right. But even now, it didn't feel like enough. I had failed them once, but I wouldn't fail them again. When I stood up to leave, a part of me wanted to stay, to let the grief wash over me one more time. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had work to do. Justice had a price, and I had already paid mine. It was time to make sure the world knew the cost. Later, in a secured room with the federal official, I listened closely as he laid out the plan. His face was sharp, the lines around his eyes deeper now, as if the weight of this case had taken more from him than he wanted to admit. "We've got the green light," he said, his voice steady. "You're right in the center of this. We need you to lead a new investigative unit. Off the books. No red tape, no bureaucratic delays. Just you, your team, and the truth." I took a breath, looking him in the eye. I wasn't here for charity. I wasn't here to play by anyone else's rules. "What's the catch?" I asked. "The catch is this," he said, pausing as if weighing the consequences. "You'll get direct access to all the files, all the intel, and you'll be in charge. But we need your team to be exclusive, full support. You'll get real benefits for the families of the people who were lost, the ones whose deaths were swept under the rug." I didn't hesitate. This was what I'd been fighting for. The truth, my team, the families. "Conditions?" He didn't flinch. "Everything you need. No more waiting around for permission, but you'll have to keep it off the books for now. We can't let the people we're after get wind of this." I nodded, thinking of the fire, of the way everything had burned, how people's lives had been reduced to smoke and ashes. "Done," I said. "But I want my team, the ones who survived, and I want the families to get what they deserve. I'll need full access to the case files. Everything. Nothing's off limits." His eyes were sharp. "You'll have it. We're not pulling punches anymore. This goes beyond a single fire. This is about taking down an entire system of corruption." A weight settled in my chest, a familiar, bitter ache. I had wanted this, needed it. But I had always known that no matter how much I uncovered, the cost would be high. Still, I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not after everything we had lost. "We'll call it Echo Vigil," I said, the name coming to me in an instant, fitting like it had always been there. "Keeping watch for those who no longer can." He smiled, though it was tight, the edges fraying with the gravity of what we were about to start. "Echo Vigil, it's yours." I stood, ready to walk out of the room and into the unknown, ready to take this fight wherever it led. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. Not just for me, but for them, for my team, for those whose voices had been silenced. Echo Vigil wasn't just a name, it was a promise, and I was going to make sure we kept it. I spent the next few days pulling together my team. I didn't need anyone who didn't understand what this fight meant. No, I needed people who were connected to this. People who had lost something in the same way I had, who knew the cost of fighting against a system that didn't care. I called in people I trusted. Some were survivors from that day, those who had been injured but made it out. Others were the brothers, sisters, and children of the fallen. Each one of them had something to prove. Each one of them was ready to take on the same fight I'd started when I was dragged back into this. First, I reached out to Emma, the daughter of one of the team members who had died. She was a fighter. I knew she'd be in. Then there was Josh, who had been my protege on the force. Sharp, resourceful, and loyal. He'd lost everything in the fire, too. They both understood the stakes. When I made the call, there was no hesitation. And last, I brought in Cole, a former firefighter who had worked alongside us for years. He'd never been officially on the team, but he had been there when it all went wrong. He was a quiet one, but you didn't last in this business without learning how to read people. And Cole had seen enough to know when a fire was set to burn. Together, we made up Echo Vigil. The first mission came fast. A new environmental crisis had emerged. A series of small chemical spills had been reported near an old industrial site. No one seemed to notice, though. Not until the leaks started spreading faster than they should have, poisoning the groundwater, spreading contamination. The company that owned the site had filed permits to dispose of the waste safely, but the logs were doctored. The inspection reports? Scrubbed. Same damn playbook. I called my team into a conference room, the tension in the air palpable. They took their seats without a word, all of them focused, knowing what was at stake. This isn't just about the environment, I said, looking at each of them. This is about the same people who destroyed us, the same people who manipulated everything to keep the truth buried. We're walking into another mess they created, and this time, we're not just looking to clean it up. We're going to expose them, every last one of them. They nodded, understanding without needing further explanation. We'd been through too much already. There was no going back now. Here's how we're going to play this, I continued, laying out the plan. We go in quiet. No one knows we're coming. We'll document everything, get the proof, then hit them where it hurts. We'll use their own lies against them. No more mistakes. Emma was the first to speak. And if they fight back? They will, I said, my voice cold. But we're not backing down. We go in with our eyes open this time. We move fast, we hit hard, and we don't stop until we're done. The room was still. No one spoke. There was no need. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just another job. This wasn't even a mission anymore. This was war. Later, as the team prepared, I made one last stop before we left. I walked into my father's study, the place where I had spent so many years pretending that I was part of his world. I stood there for a moment, looking at the familiar cold decor, the old leather-bound books, the polished wood desk, the trophies lining the shelves. It all felt empty now. I reached into my bag and pulled out one of the blackened stones I had taken from the memorial. Without a word, I placed it on his desk. No note, no explanation, just a marker, a reminder. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need anything from him anymore. As I turned to leave, the weight of it all settled in my chest. The fight ahead wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be quick. But Echo Vigil was ready. We were done being shadows. This time, we were taking control.